The best time to spend your money is probably not when you think. It's not at retirement. It's not when you hit financial independence. It's actually much earlier than that. And if you wait too long, you'll have all the money, but you'll have missed an important window. So, in this episode, I'm going to show you exactly when and why the timing of spending your money matters more than the amount. Welcome to the podcast, Real Estate Investing with Coach Carson. I'm your host, Chad Carson. You can also call me Coach Carson. And in this show, I teach you how to use real estate investing to achieve financial freedom so you can spend your time doing more of what matters. And this is a special Friday Coach's Corner edition of the podcast where I'm a little bit more informal, have a conversation with you about a topic that's been on my mind. And in this case, I read a book called Die with Zero that challenged me. It made me think about a lot of things. And I wanted to share a few ideas with you. And I'm going to start with a story. So the story I want to tell you is actually a fable from Aesop's Fables. And there's really a metaphor for the whole book that's really important. It's about the ant and the grasshopper. And you might have heard of this or seen the old cartoon on Disney. The story goes that there was a grasshopper who loved to enjoy life. And instead of preparing for the future and saving for a rainy day, he knew how to have fun. He enjoyed himself. And all summer long, he played, he enjoyed himself, he had a good time. Meanwhile, the ant and all the ant's sisters prepared for the future. They saved for a rainy day. They stored food. They had delayed gratification to make sure they could survive when the winter came, which was going to come. And the grasshopper in the end of the story, depending on which ending you have, the Disney ending or the non-ending, did not prepare. And during the winter was cold and couldn't survive. And, sometimes the ants took the grasshopper in. In other cases, the grasshopper just died. And so the hero of the traditional story, the moral of this story is the ant. The ant was the one who delayed gratification, prepared for a rainy day. And, how virtuous is that? How good is that? And how silly or how unwise was the grasshopper who didn't save. So there is definitely some wisdom to that story, but the author of Die with Zero pointed out that what about the ant? We don't talk about the ant much. It's clear that the grasshopper should have saved a little bit and thought about the future. But the ant, when does the ant actually get to enjoy life and have fun? Is the ant's entire life all about survival and that's it? And then you die? And the metaphor here is that he wrote this book for the ants of the world. And I'll raise my hand here. I'm one of the people who prepares for the future and plans. I have this YouTube channel about financial freedom. And so those of you who work pretty hard, who are able to save money, you fall into the ant category. And so the book is written for you because there is this idea that there's a happy medium between not enough saving and not enough delayed gratification and perhaps being too much of a saver and never actually living your life. And I want to tell another story that I really enjoy and has been very helpful for me about Aristotle. He was an old Greek philosopher, and he had this idea of a golden mean. And so anything that's virtuous, anything that's good, for example, courage, you could have too much of that good thing or too little of that good thing. So if you have too much courage, you're somebody who's going to jump out of the airplane without a parachute. You're just like ridiculously amount of courage. You're going to die. The other end, though, is if you have too little courage, you're a coward. You won't face anything. You're going to kind of sit in the corner and never always be afraid of everything in life. So there's this golden mean of courage where you don't have too much or too little. And this applies perfectly to the idea of delayed gratification. So those of us who are savers, the ants in the room, we probably have a little bit too much at times. And that was the author's main point, was that we save, we kick the can on gratification and enjoying life until we don't have enough time, until it's the end of our life. And so that would be having too much delayed gratification. And of course, the grasshopper is on the other end where you're not saving enough. So this story, this idea is central to the book of challenging the ants in the room, myself included, to think a little bit more about how can we balance our life out and enjoy it sooner. So if you want to enjoy life sooner, one of the ideas I really liked from the book was the concept of ROE, or return on experience, and memory dividends. So this is different than return on investment or return on your equity that we normally think about in investing. Just taking that concept and saying, what are the most valuable things for our life? And it's typically our experiences. So let me explain what that means. So we go to work and we trade our time and our energy for this thing called money. And he actually quoted in the book from one of my favorite books, financial books, called Your Money or Your Life. Your Money or Your Life. And the big concept from that book was that money is just stored life energy. Is you contributing whatever you do, and it's stored in this little dollar or this digital thing on your computer, and it gives you, it's like potential energy. You can use it for other things. And what do you do with that potential energy? Well, you can spend it, you can trade it for survival. First of all, you got to pay for food, you got to pay for your housing, got to pay for water, and that's essential. We got to have money. But you also trade it for stuff. Maybe it's just knickknack stuff. Maybe it's actually a big old car that you enjoy, or maybe a nicer, bigger house. That's the quality stuff of life as well. But you can also buy experiences. You can buy investments, and all of these things are your expenses. This is what you spend your money on. And if you break it down and think about it, though, investments, you probably understand. This gives you future potential to buy more survival stuff and more experiences. So investments are hopefully growing so that you can do even more in the future. You understand that. But let's think about experiences and also stuff. The reason we invest in experiences, we spend our money on that, is because we get fulfillment from that. We get joy, happiness, whatever you want to call that. And he really emphasizes experiences in the book, because if you look at a lot of psychological studies, experiences are one of the best ways to get a return on happiness, the return on fulfillment, because you have an experience once that you benefit from. You're typically doing it with other people. So you have this benefit of having like a social enjoyment. And then you also have this future enjoyment, which he called memory dividends from every one of your experiences. So I drew out a little graph to show, just kind of copied from the book, on what this means. And so think about, like, over time, if you focused on spending your money on experiences, then maybe in year one, you have this one great experience. You go on a trip, you go on a vacation, maybe you do something fun with your family or with your loved one, and you have a certain amount of fulfillment. Like, let's call those like experience points or fulfillment points. And that's in year one. And then maybe year two, you do a little bit better. You have a few more experiences. And so that line goes up a little bit. But in year two, you also get the memories of your experiences in year one. So it kind of stacks up, and you can enjoy those memory dividends. You can think back, you can look at the pictures, you can tell stories with the people you experienced that with, and you have happiness and fulfillment in year two. Then year three, you do more experiences, and they just keeps on stacking. And over time, if you stack experiences and they're really meaningful experiences, whatever that might be for you, it could be, for me, I travel a lot, but it could just be, hey, I work in my garden a lot, or I volunteer locally, or I do things that are fulfilling for me. Like, that's up to you what those experiences are. But there's no doubt that there's the dividend, which is the big idea for me, is that if you stack those up, instead of just stacking up stuff, if you stack up experiences over time, that's the good stuff. Like, even at the end of your life, you think about it, when you're not able to have as many experiences, you have this full, rich mind of memories and dividends that come with those. And if you have people close to you, those relationships, you can also share those memories with them too. And so I thought that was a really cool way to think about your energy that you put into your money, is not just maximizing the amount of money you have. You need money. It's a tool to get you these things in the future, but also say, what is the reason I'm saving this money in the first place? Is for these experiences. And I want to start stacking those up, and I want to kind of work it backwards from maximizing happiness, maximizing fulfillment, and not just maximizing the amount of money I have in my bank account. So if the goal is to stack up experiences to have the most fulfillment, not just the most money, the question is, how do I actually have those experiences? What do I need? And the author Bill Perkins talked about three things. You need wealth, money, so that's pretty obvious. But you also need time, and you need health. And I called these, just to remember them, the wealth trifecta. Remind me a lot of the 4 Hour Work Week. He talked about multiple currencies that you needed to actually enjoy life. And so if you have a lot of money, but you don't have a lot of time and you don't have a lot of health, let's say you're in the hospital bed and you have very little time to do anything else, what does all the money matter? Or if you have a lot of time, but you don't have health or wealth. So you have to have all three of these. But the trick is that different parts of your life, you don't have an abundance of all three of these. And I have a little graph here that made it kind of more obvious to me. If you think about the times of your life, like in your 20s, you probably have not as much money. You just graduated from college or maybe high school, and money's not abundant for you. But you do have an abundance of health. It's probably the easiest time for you to move and to go do things. And you probably have a lot of time as well. Maybe you don't have kids at that point. Maybe you do. It just depends on your life circumstances. But the point is, out of those three, trifecta of wealth, you don't have much money, but you do have a lot of health and time. And there's certain activities, certain experiences that are better suited towards this time of your life when you have a lot of health and a lot of time. 30s and 50s, maybe you do have a family. At least that's the experience I'm having right now. You have kids, and you probably have less time because you have commitments, you have your job, you have things you're doing. But you still have good health, and you probably have more money. You're probably making more income in your 30s to 50s than you did in your 20s. And then you fast forward into your 70s, your 80s, You might have more money accumulated at that point. You have a lot of time because there's less commitments that maybe with a job or something else, you're retired, but maybe your health isn't as good. So if you're wanting to go on some trip or hike some, trail that you really wanted to do or ride some bike, maybe you can't do that as much because of your health. And so that's the point, is thinking about this as a balancing act, that you have to have all three of those, but you have to think about the times of your life when you have more kind of a bank account of each of these currencies that are actually wealth to give you those experiences. And so there's another idea that I'm just going to transition to right away that's very similar to this, is that you have to think about the seasons of your life. If you have health, wealth, and time, or the currencies that you're going to use to do what matters to you in life, then separated it out into seasons, or what he called time buckets. And I'll tell you a couple stories that really kind of drove this home for me. And when I did this in my life, is that back in 2009, I was 29 years old. My wife was a couple of years older than that. We didn't have kids. We were newly married a couple of years before that. We had good health. We could move around really well. And it actually was the Great Recession at that point. So things were financially not great. I was not financially independent, financially free, but we had the ability to save a little bit of money. And we took a trip, kind of a backpacking trip for 4 months, started in Spain. I took Spanish. This is where I learned to speak Spanish. I'm still not perfect at it, but kind of got my base there. We lived in Peru with a family for a month. We hiked to Machu Picchu for 4 days. We just had a series of experiences that were spectacular, amazing. It was a transformative experience for me, just getting away and kind of stop being such a type A personality and just enjoy life a little bit more. I needed that. And this was an experience that for that time of my life, 29 years old, it wasn't perfect timing with the Great Recession, financially, everything else, but it was perfect timing for what I needed in that season of my life. Without kids, good health, going and traveling around, staying in hostels, things were not quite as comfortable, but it was wonderful and amazing. So 2009, that was one experience we had. 2017, fast forward, we had kids at that point. I was 37 years old. We had a 3 and a 5-year-old kid. And from my real estate standpoint, we had just bought 28 units. So one of our biggest financial deal that we ever bought, over $1 million purchase price for our property. And each of those units needed a lot of remodeling. And I decided to go on a trip to South America. In this case, we wanted to live in Ecuador. And so we rented a house. Our kids went to local schools there. And the opportunity, the timing, the season of our life for that was our kids being that young. It wasn't easy to travel with them in some ways, but in some ways, this was the perfect time because we wanted them to speak Spanish. My wife's a Spanish teacher, a language teacher. And we really had this idea and this dream of them being able to be fluent at an early age in the language and have kind of more of a native tongue speaking Spanish. And so that was the opportunity. Like there was reasons we couldn't go or shouldn't go, but that was an amazing opportunity. And so that was the season of our life, was the chance to be with them at that age and to do that thing at that time. And our travel looked much different than it did in 2009. We stayed put a lot more. We rented an apartment. We connected with other families, spent a lot of time at the playground. And so that season of life had its own opportunities that we took advantage of. Now that's very specific to my own life, my travel. That might not be your dream. It might not be realistic for where you are, but you can do this activity of thinking about your life in time buckets, which is an exercise from the book that I found really helpful. And so if you think about your life and say, all right, there's a season for everything. I'm only going to be in my 20s and single one time. I'm only going to be have young kids one time. I'm only going to have kids that are in high school one time, whatever the case might be for you. And draw it out for yourself on a piece of paper with your life in 5 to 10 year buckets. So like maybe it's 25 to 35, maybe it's 36 to 40 years old, 40 to 50, 50 to 60, and so on. Whatever works for you. But the point is to list activities, experiences, and people that you want to be with during that time that might be unique to that time bucket of your life. And don't limit yourself in terms of money. Just brainstorm, specifically thinking about the time and thinking about your health. There might be some activities that you want to do from a physical standpoint in your 40s or 30s that you won't be able to do maybe in your 70s because it just might not be realistic. And vice versa, there might be some things you could do later on in your 70s that would make more sense than in your 20s or 30s. And so just brainstorm it. And the point of all this is to help us realize that we have these seasons that are limited, and it's almost like we're separate people during these different times of our lives, and we die to our 20s at the end of our 20s. We die to our 30s at the end of our 30s, and if you can take advantage of those experiences that are uniquely built for each of those time buckets, you're increasing the amount of fulfillment, the amount of experiences you have that really make your life rich and enjoyable. So those are a few of my biggest ideas that I really took away, but this book had a lot more. I didn't agree with 100% of it, but I found it really enjoyable and challenging. And the key takeaways for all of us who are ants, back in that metaphor, the people who are tending to do pretty well saving and deferring life a little bit, the big takeaways I had were start spending your money earlier, not holding on to it so much so that you have a bunch of money at the end of your life that you aren't necessarily getting to enjoy at the prime seasons of your life. So start spending your money earlier and work less earlier. That's kind of goes with the money because you're usually working to make money. And I get the fact that we have this fear that we're going to run out of money at some point. But what about running out of life? Like what about running out of time to do some of the experiences that really matter to us? And one of the best tools that I have found for myself that I really, have used personally and also talked to a lot of other people about are mini retirements, whether it's a month or several months or years, where you can kind of carve out some time in the middle of your life, throughout your life, to have some of these experiences that you might have thought you were going to put off until later in life. Such a great tool, has been really big, important to me. And those trips I shared earlier were examples of mini retirements. So lots of other ideas I would encourage you to read with that book. And I also encourage you, if these kind of ideas of investing in real estate, not just to make the most money, but to make the most money, but also to have a business model that builds wealth of health and time, and you're able to have these experiences. One of the best ways to do that is to be around a community of other people who are also aspiring to that, who have a business model, not just to 10x everything and have 1,000 units, but have enough properties so that you can enjoy your life and do that. If you want to do that more, being around a community, and Rental Property Mastery is a community I've built where I do coaching and community. And basically, you just get challenged to be better as a real estate investor and with your life goals as well. So if that's interesting to you, Rental Property Mastery is something that has been full off and on. We hit our 300 member cap or got close to that. But we always have new members who are new spots available. So if you're interested in that, go to coachcarson.com/mastery. You can get on a waiting list to get into the community. If you resonate with this, I think you'll love what happens inside of the community with the different activities, the coaching, the education. And I would just love to meet you and help you out inside of there. So go to coachcarson.com/mastery to check that out. So I hope this idea of taking advantage of your health and your time and your wealth earlier in life has been exciting, but you might be thinking, like, practically, how do I actually do this? Like, that's a great idea, a great concept. So I want to recommend my next episode, which is you don't have to retire in 15 years. You can do it earlier. And I have an interview and a conversation with Jillian Johnsrud, who wrote a book called Retire Often. We have both taken a lot of mini retirements earlier in life. And that's what this episode is all about, is helping you plan it and kind of get with the practical details of whether it's a month, whether it's a few weeks, whether it's a year, taking some time off and enjoying life earlier. So check that episode out. If you're watching on YouTube, there'll be a thumbnail above me here you can click on. Or if you're listening on the podcast or watching on YouTube, there'll also be a link to that episode in the podcast or the YouTube description below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.